look into the mirror, and for a moment, you hardly recognize yourself. There's a tightness in your jaw, a heaviness in your shoulders, and a subtle weariness in your eyes that wasn't there before. Life has been moving fast, relentless, and somewhere along the way, you feel as if you've lost the driver's seat. Days blur together, stress compounds, and you catch yourself thinking, how did I get here? What if you could take control again, not with one grand gesture, but one small, deliberate habit at a time? What if mastering your mornings, your reactions, your reflections, your willingness to embrace discomfort, and even your silence could slowly transform you into someone unrecognizable, someone calm, focused, and powerful? Stoic philosophy isn't an abstract relic of the past. It's a practical roadmap to reclaim your life. By learning how to respond instead of merely react, you begin steering your energy, your attention, and your choices. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll explore 5 Stoic micro-habits, practices backed by both ancient wisdom and modern psychology that can reshape your inner world and set you on the path toward true self-mastery. These are Stoic habits for life transformation, simple daily practices that quietly, powerfully build resilience and control. Are you ready to begin? Part 1. Own your morning, own your life. You begin here with a simple Stoic axiom. Control what you can, accept what you cannot. Epictetus, and you turn that sentence into a practice you can do in 10 to 15 minutes each morning. Imagine waking before the day's noise, sitting on the edge of the bed or at the kitchen table with a glass of water, breathing slowly, and letting your mind settle. For the first few breaths, you refuse the reflex to check your phone, refuse the pull of the inbox, and instead, you give yourself a quiet, deliberate 10 minutes. In that time, you write down exactly 3 things you can control today. 3 small, concrete actions you can take, and nothing else. Maybe it's reply to the Martinez email with a clear next step. Maybe it's walk for 20 minutes at lunch. Maybe it's say no to one extra demand. This micro habit, morning silence plus a tiny focused journaling practice, looks almost laughably small on paper, but you will discover its power comes from the way it anchors your nervous system and your intention before the day tries to hijack both. Picture an office worker you might know. They used to launch into the day, reacting, answering Slack messages, putting out small fires, letting other people's agendas determine their mood. One morning, they try the habit. They drink water, close their eyes for a minute, breathe deep, and write 3 tiny goals they actually control. The result is not dramatic theater. It's a quieter, steadier competence. Because they started by directing attention, their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and self-control, gets engaged early. And throughout the morning, they notice decision fatigue hitting less often. They choose more deliberately. They don't get pulled into the endless scroll of anxious reactivity. Their stress markers feel lower by the end of the day. They sleep better. That's not magic. Modern psychology explains it plainly. Rituals and journaling scaffold the brain's executive functions, reduce rumination, and lower cortisol spikes by creating predictability and reducing cognitive load. When you offload a few decisions into a short morning ritual, you preserve mental energy for the hard choices that matter. Stoicism gives you the moral map for why this matters. Epictetus taught you to invest attention where you have agency. Marcus Aurelius reminds you that your mind is the citadel that must be defended each dawn. When you practice controlling the controllables, the three actions you choose, you shrink the space for anxiety to grow about everything you cannot change. Traffic, other people's moods, the economy. Emotional energy follows the focus of attention. By training it in the quiet before the day, you redirect it from vague worry into purposeful motion. The feeling this creates is practical and humane. The chaotic rush of mornings becomes a sequence of small, meaningful choices. The heavy, reactive you becomes someone who moves through the world with an internal compass. There's also a relational ripple. When you show up calm and purposeful, your tone changes in conversations. You interrupt less, and people respond to steadiness. Your partner notices it. Your colleagues notice it. The morning you own quietly has effects that last all day. So what should you do tomorrow? Set an alarm 15 minutes earlier. Place a notebook and pen where you sit. Make a small decision to skip the phone for those minutes. Drink water. Breathe slowly for a minute. And write 3 things you can control. Keep the items specific and actionable. Avoid vague aspirational entries like, be better. Choose. Send the follow-up email instead. Try this for a week and notice the difference in how you manage stress, how many unnecessary decisions you avoid, and how often you feel centered rather than pulled. This is not about perfection. It is daily practice in reclaiming your attention, your choices, and ultimately, your life. Micro habits like this are the engine of real transformation. Stoic habits that rebuild your inner architecture one small morning at a time. And that is how you begin to reinvent yourself into someone calmer, more focused, and more resilient. Part 2. Pause before you react. Master your emotions. Epictetus left you with a line so sharp it can cut through the noise of your day. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it. You've felt the truth of this in your bones, in those moments when anger surged before you had time to think, when words leapt from your mouth and landed heavier than you intended. Anger always feels justified in the instant, but its wreckage lingers. And yet, here is a practice so deceptively simple that it seems almost trivial. When frustration stirs, you pause, you count to 10, you take a slow breath, and if you can, you write down what you feel. This isn't weakness. It is discipline in its purest form. The refusal to be a puppet of your own emotions. Picture a mother whose child begins to whine relentlessly at the end of a long day. Her body wants to shout. Her voice rises in her throat. But she remembers the pause. She silently counts, inhales, exhales, and steadies herself before responding. Instead of a harsh word, she kneels, looks the child in the eye, and speaks calmly. What happens next is subtle but powerful. The child, instead of recoiling in fear, learns through imitation that calmness, not rage, is the way conflict is handled. That single pause becomes an act of teaching, a lesson that shapes respect and trust far more effectively than any scolding ever could. Or imagine yourself in the workplace, where criticism stings like salt on an open wound. A colleague undermines you in front of the team, and everything in you screams to defend yourself instantly, to snap back, to restore pride. But you resist the instinct. You sit with the discomfort, count 10 breaths, jot down the heat of your anger in a margin of your notebook. And then, when you finally respond, your words are measured, your tone steady, and instead of appearing defensive or insecure, you project poise. That moment of restraint flips the power dynamic. You no longer seem cornered, but in control, commanding respect precisely because you did not react impulsively. Modern psychology calls this emotional regulation, and it is among the most essential skills for resilience. When you pause, you interrupt the flood of cortisol and adrenaline that surges through your bloodstream in a moment of stress. That pause gives your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that reasons and strategizes, time to come back online before the amygdala, the seat of raw emotion, hijacks you completely. It's neuroscience that explains what the Stoics intuited long ago. If you slow down, you give yourself the power to choose, and in that choice lies freedom. Over time, practicing this habit actually rewires your nervous system. You become less reactive, less volatile, and more trusted by those around you. People instinctively respect those who stay calm under pressure because calmness radiates authority. The Stoics knew that mastering your emotions was not about suppressing them or pretending they didn't exist. Seneca warned against bottling up anger because buried emotion eventually explodes. Instead, Stoicism teaches you to acknowledge the feeling, to hold it in your hand and examine it before deciding whether to release it. By writing down what you feel, you externalize it. You prevent it from swirling endlessly in your mind. The page becomes a container that keeps your inner world clear. The transformation here is emotional alchemy. You take the heat of frustration and transmute it into the coolness of composure. From bickering with children to navigating criticism at work, the practice is the same. A pause, a breath, a written line. Each time you choose restraint, you reclaim dignity from the jaws of reactivity. Each time you pause, you remind yourself that you are not at the mercy of your emotions. Your emotions are at the mercy of you. So what should you try today? When irritation rises, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when a loved one snaps at you, when work feels unfair, do not speak immediately. Count slowly to 10, inhale fully, exhale deeply, and if you can, write down exactly what you are feeling in one sentence. Later, reflect on how the pause changed the outcome. This is the habit that turns chaos into calm, that converts insecurity into confidence. The more you practice it, the more you move from being tossed around by your emotions to standing like a captain at the helm, steady even when the seas are stormy. And slowly, people begin to notice something different about you. Not only that you stay composed, but that your composure grants you a quiet authority they can't help but respect. That is the Stoic way of mastering your emotions, transforming moments of anger into proof of your inner strength. Part 3. Daily reflection. Learn from yourself. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most famous Stoic emperor, spent his nights writing to himself in what we now call meditations. He wasn't writing for an audience, nor for history, but for clarity. His words were reminders, corrections, and encouragements meant only for his own soul. He understood something essential. A life unexamined drifts, but a life reflected upon is one you can continually shape. For you, this principle becomes a micro-habit of just a few minutes each evening. Before sleep, You take a notebook and write down 3 things: 1 achievement, 1 failure, and 1 lesson you draw from them both. Picture a freelancer at the end of a chaotic day. Deadlines pressed, emails piled, distractions tugged at every corner of their focus. Without reflection, the day feels like a blur of effort with no direction. But tonight, the freelancer sits down, writes 1 small achievement, finishing a draft on time, then 1 failure, checking social media for an hour that should have been work, and finally, a lesson, realizing that breaking tasks into blocks helped progress, but leaving notifications on was a trap. This simple record transforms what was vague stress into clear data, a narrative they can learn from. Over weeks, the freelancer begins to notice patterns. Progress isn't random, improvement is possible, and failure is no longer condemnation, but feedback. Now imagine a parent, someone who spends the day managing meals, school schedules, and the endless demands of children. By nightfall, exhaustion tempts them to collapse into bed, feeling as though nothing was truly accomplished. But instead, they pause for reflection. They write that their achievement was keeping patience during a sibling argument. Their failure, snapping in frustration at dinner. Their lesson, realizing that preparing meals earlier reduced tension, while rushing only created conflict. Over time, this nightly ritual shifts the lens through which they see themselves. Instead of drowning in guilt or feeling lost, they notice progress in their patience, learn from mistakes without self-condemnation, and reclaim a sense of agency in their family life. Modern psychology explains why this habit works so powerfully. Self-reflection activates what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, the belief that skills and qualities can be developed through effort and learning. When you pause to analyze your day, you reframe experiences not as final judgments of your worth, but as raw material for growth. The simple act of writing crystallizes vague emotions into concrete insights, reducing the cognitive noise that keeps you restless at night. Reflection also deepens self-awareness, which research shows is linked to better emotional regulation, stronger relationships, and more consistent progress toward goals. Instead of being trapped in cycles of self-criticism, you cultivate a narrative of continuous learning. The Stoics practice the same art in their own way. Seneca advised reviewing each day like a judge reviewing a case, calmly, fairly, without self-deception. Marcus Aurelius himself asked, "What did I do today? What was done well? What could be improved?" For him, failure was never a verdict on his value as a man or emperor. It was simply another chance to adjust tomorrow. This Stoic approach removes the sting of helplessness. When you treat failure as information, you disarm it of shame. Reflection turns even missteps into building blocks, transforming what feels like wasted time into fuel for wisdom. The emotional shift this creates in you is profound. Where before you felt directionless, overwhelmed, or disappointed, reflection grounds you. A chaotic day becomes a structured narrative. A discouraging moment becomes a teacher. Instead of drifting into sleep with frustration, you close the day with a sense of order and progress. Over weeks, this practice builds confidence, not because you never fail, but because you can always learn. Hope returns not as blind optimism, but as earned trust in your own capacity to grow. So tonight, try this. Before you let your phone pull you into distraction, or let exhaustion swallow you, take a pen and write 3 lines. One achievement, however small, one failure, however embarrassing, and one lesson that bridges them. Do this daily, and you will notice how failure becomes less frightening, how progress becomes more visible, and how your inner compass sharpens. This is the essence of Stoic reflection. You do not need to predict the future or control every outcome. You simply need to learn from yourself each night and carry those lessons into tomorrow. With that, you move from feeling lost and inadequate to becoming someone calm, aware, and steadily more powerful in your own life. Part 4. Embrace discomfort. Build inner strength. Seneca once wrote, "What doesn't kill you strengthens you." This was not just a casual remark. It was a way of living. As a Stoic, he believed that hardship was not a curse, but a tool. And in your life, the same holds true. If you look closely, you'll notice that the moments that shaped you most were rarely the easiest ones. Growth never comes from lying on the couch. It comes from the friction of effort, the sting of failure, and the discipline of doing what's uncomfortable. Imagine this. You work in an office, and every lunch break, the temptation calls you. Scrolling endlessly on your phone, eating more than you need, killing time. It feels safe. It feels easy. But today, you choose differently. Instead of sinking into that comfort, you step outside and walk briskly for 15 minutes. Or maybe you do a quick workout in the break room. Your colleagues might raise their eyebrows, but deep down, you feel something shift. You've conquered not the world, but yourself. That's the silent victory Stoicism celebrates. The victory of choosing strength over ease. Or think of the parent at home, exhausted from daily routines, staring at a pile of dishes or laundry, tempted to leave it for tomorrow. Or perhaps staring at a recipe that feels intimidating. Instead of surrendering, she steps into discomfort, trying the new recipe, cleaning the mess, tackling what she wished to avoid. It's not glamorous, but over time, these small acts of courage build a powerful reservoir of self-respect. She is no longer passively reacting to life. She is actively shaping it. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, or comfort zone expansion. Each time you lean into discomfort rather than escape it, your brain learns that stress is survivable. The stress hormone cortisol spikes briefly, but then levels off, teaching your nervous system resilience. With repeated practice, discomfort becomes less threatening. You begin to face challenges with a steadier hand, whether it's a demanding project, a difficult conversation, or an unexpected setback. The Stoics knew this long before science confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius slept on a simple bed and wore plain clothes even as emperor. Epictetus, once a slave, taught his students to deliberately practice hardship so they wouldn't crumble when real trials came. Seneca himself practiced days of poverty, eating the simplest food, wearing rough clothing, so that when fate took a cruel turn, he would not be undone. The lesson is clear. You don't avoid discomfort to live well. You embrace it because it prepares you for everything life can throw at you. Even in today's world, leaders and creators apply this principle. Take someone like David Goggins, the former Navy SEAL turned ultra-marathon runner, who built his philosophy around deliberately seeking pain and challenge. He transformed his life not by avoiding struggle, but by running straight into it, showing that resilience is forged in discomfort. While his approach is extreme, the underlying truth is universal. You grow stronger by training yourself to do what you don't want to do. So how do you apply this Stoic micro-habit? Each day, choose one small act of deliberate discomfort. It doesn't have to be grand. Take a cold shower. Speak up in a meeting when you feel shy. Skip the unnecessary indulgence. Clean the mess immediately. Push yourself in a workout when you'd rather stop. Or simply sit with your own silence instead of drowning it out with noise. These tiny choices, stacked day after day, turn you into someone unshakable. And here's the paradox. Once you stop running from discomfort, you realize it was never your enemy. It was your greatest teacher. You learn that fear shrinks when you face it. That weakness transforms into strength only through use. That every time you choose the harder path, you expand your capacity for life itself. In the end, this habit teaches you that pain is not the opposite of power. It is the path to it. What begins as a small daily decision to do the uncomfortable thing becomes the foundation of a character others respect and admire. You move from fear into steadiness, from fragility into resilience, from weakness into true inner authority. That is the power of embracing discomfort. It's not about punishment, it's about preparation. By stepping willingly into what you once avoided, you emerge not only stronger, but freer. And when life throws its hardest storms at you, you will not break. You will rise, because you've trained your spirit to be unshakable. Part 5. Silence speaks. Observe and dominate. Seneca once observed, "Silence is a source of great strength." In a world that urges you to speak louder, post faster, and assert yourself constantly, this Stoic truth feels almost subversive. Yet it is precisely this restraint, this ability to hold your tongue and sharpen your ears, that grants you real authority. When you are silent, you do not disappear. You become powerful. Picture yourself in a crowded meeting room. The discussion is heated, voices clashing, people eager to show they're the smartest in the room. The temptation to jump in is strong, to prove your worth by speaking quickly. But you resist. You sit quietly, taking notes, observing not just words but tones, pauses, body language. When the room begins to calm, you ask a single, incisive question. Suddenly, everyone turns to you. That one moment of silence, followed by a precise contribution, earns you more respect than 100 rushed opinions. You are no longer just another voice. You are the voice that matters. Or consider the family setting. A parent, exhausted by a teenager's complaints, feels the impulse to lecture or argue. Instead, the parent listens. Not the passive kind of listening, but active listening. Eyes steady, body present, mind engaged. Then comes a simple question. What do you feel is the hardest part of this? The teenager, instead of shutting down or escalating, begins to open up. The conversation shifts from conflict to connection. This is not weakness, it is mastery. Modern psychology calls this skill active listening. Studies show that when people feel genuinely heard, their defenses lower, trust increases, and influence deepens. By holding silence, you create space for others to reveal themselves, sometimes more than they intended. It's not just about kindness, it's about clarity. The less you speak, the more you see. And the more you see, the better your decisions become. The Stoics understood silence as a weapon of control. Epictetus reminded his students to speak only when necessary, and Marcus Aurelius often wrote that restraint was more impressive than display. To them, silence was not emptiness, it was discipline. Every word left unsaid was a victory over impulse. Every pause before reaction was a moment of freedom. Think also of modern figures who embody this truth. Consider Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors of all time. He is known for listening far more than speaking, for sitting in silence during meetings, and asking only a handful of sharp questions. This quiet presence makes his words carry immense weight when he finally chooses to speak. People lean in, not because he talks much, but because he talks rarely and wisely. His silence doesn't diminish him, it amplifies him. When you practice this Stoic micro-habit, speaking less, observing more, and questioning before asserting, you shift from noise to influence. You stop scattering your energy, and instead, concentrate it. You learn to read between the lines, to sense moods, to notice what others miss. This doesn't just make you calmer, it makes you formidable. And here lies the transformation. Silence teaches you patience. It turns your restlessness into composure. It turns passivity into authority. The person who blurts out every thought is a slave to impulse. The one who waits, who chooses words deliberately, commands the room. So tomorrow, try this. In your next conversation, resist the urge to interrupt. In your next meeting, take notes before you speak. With your family, ask one thoughtful question instead of delivering a lecture. These small shifts build a reputation of calm strength. People will notice, even if they can't explain why, that when you open your mouth, your words matter. In the end, silence is not emptiness. It is presence. It is the art of ruling not with volume, but with vision. When you let silence speak first, you project authority without aggression, confidence without arrogance, and slowly, you discover the truth Seneca wanted you to see. Silence is not withdrawal, but dominance. It is the quiet power that makes you unshakable. As we draw to the close of this journey, take a moment to reflect. 5 micro habits, each deceptively small, yet together capable of transforming your life from the inside out. By owning your mornings, you reclaim focus and energy before the day pulls you into chaos. By pausing before you react, you master your emotions and command respect in every interaction. By reflecting daily, you turn mistakes into lessons, failure into growth, and uncertainty into confidence. By embracing discomfort, you build resilience and inner strength that no external circumstance can shake. And by speaking less and observing more, you harness the quiet power of presence, influencing the world around you without ever raising your voice. These habits are not fleeting tricks. They are practices rooted in Stoicism and validated by modern psychology. They remind you that transformation is not about dramatic leaps, but consistent, intentional steps. They show that control, composure, and clarity are built in the moments others overlook, in the silence, in the pause, in the willingness to act when it's uncomfortable. When you integrate them into your daily life, you begin to feel a shift from reactive to intentional, from scattered to centered, from ordinary to unshakable. You start to become a version of yourself that others may not recognize, not because you are someone new, but because you have reclaimed the power of your mind, your habits, and your choices. Now comes the most important part: action. Don't just watch and nod. If you end this video unchanged, nothing changes. Pick one habit that resonates with you and live it today. Write about your experience. Share your insights in the comments and witness how small changes ripple into real transformation. If this video has given you value, hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to join a community dedicated to mastering Stoicism. Life transformation, self-mastery, and micro-habits that build unshakable calm. Your journey to becoming the best version of yourself begins with one small, deliberate step. Right now, this is the path of Stoic living. Thoughtful, intentional, and profoundly empowering. Step into it and watch how life responds.